The doctors told everyone I probably wouldn't survive. My family acted like they hoped they were right. The funny thing is, they were wrong about both. And that single mistake ended up costing them everything they thought they were about to inherit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm 59 years old, and I live in Sarasota, Florida, in a quiet neighborhood called Palmer Ranch. For more than 20 years, my wife and I lived in a comfortable 4-bedroom house on a peaceful street lined with old oak trees. It wasn't a mansion, but I was proud of every brick because I knew exactly how hard I'd worked for it. Back in 2002, I started Brooks Freight Services in a tiny office just off Bee Ridge Road. The place was barely large enough for one desk, an old filing cabinet, and a coffee maker that leaked more water than it brewed. At the time I had no employees, no investors, and no wealthy relatives backing me up. All I had was determination and the belief that if I worked harder than everyone else, eventually it would pay off. It did. By the beginning of 2025, my company employed almost 50 people. We managed several regional warehouse contracts throughout Florida, and every quarter our accountant walked into my office wearing the same satisfied smile. "You're doing better than ever," he'd tell me. I always answered the same way. "We're doing better." Because I honestly believed everything I had built was for my family. Turns out, I was the only one who believed that. My wife, Melissa, was 55. We'd been together for 33 years and married for 31. Our son, Ryan, was 29. Officially he worked for the company, although worked might be giving him too much credit. Most days he answered a few emails, wandered through the warehouse pretending to supervise people, and somehow always disappeared whenever real work showed up. Our daughter, Chloe, had recently turned 26. She lived about half an hour away near downtown Sarasota. She usually called me every other weekend, and if I'm being honest, most of those calls ended with her asking for some kind of favor. Then there was Nathan Carter. Nathan was 36 and technically my stepson. Melissa had become pregnant during college after dating a guy named Carter. The man disappeared almost immediately after Nathan was born. He drifted in and out of his life every few years, never held a steady job, never paid child support, and never acted like a father. When I met Melissa, she was 23 years old and raising a little 5-year-old boy completely by herself. I didn't hesitate. I fell in love with both of them. Money was tight back then. We counted every dollar, shared one old pickup truck, and worried every month about making rent. Still, those were some of the happiest years of my life because everything we had, we were building together. 2 years after we met, we got married. Around the same time, I risked nearly everything I owned to launch Brooks Freight Services. Nathan grew up calling me Dad. I taught him how to ride a bike. I coached his little league team. I helped him with algebra homework even though I hated math. When he graduated from college, I brought him into the company because I wanted him to have opportunities one never had. His biological father was still alive, so we never bothered with legal adoption papers. He kept his last name, but to me that never mattered. Family isn't built by paperwork. It's built by years. Or at least, that's what I believed. By the time Nathan was in his early 30s, I'd promoted him to Vice President of Operations. I trusted him more than anyone else in the business. If I couldn't be somewhere, Nathan represented me. I handed him access to financial records, contracts, company accounts, client meetings, everything. I never imagined I'd regret that decision. Then came a Tuesday evening in late August. It had been one of those exhausting days where every meeting seemed to create 3 more problems. The air conditioning on the 3rd floor of our office had been broken for almost 2 weeks, and I'd reminded Ryan, again, to schedule someone to repair it. He said he would. Just like he'd said the week before. Little things like that never seem important until later, when you realize they were warning signs you ignored. I finally left the office around 9:45 that night. Traffic had mostly died down. I stopped at a red light, glanced at my phone, and saw a text from Melissa. "Dinner's in the refrigerator. Don't work too late. Love you." I smiled. That message would become one of the biggest lies I ever believed. The light turned green. I eased into the intersection. That's the last thing I remember. The pickup truck never slowed down. According to the police report, it entered the intersection at nearly 60 miles an hour and slammed directly into the driver's side of my SUV. The impact crushed half the vehicle. Paramedics later told me that my seat belt and side airbags were the only reasons I was still alive. They said I was incredibly lucky. Maybe they were right. Because 3 days later, while everyone around me believed I couldn't hear a thing, I heard my wife begin planning a future without me. When people imagine a coma, they usually think it's like a deep sleep. It isn't. At least, it wasn't for me. It felt more like being buried alive inside my own body. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't lift a finger. I couldn't even let someone know I was still there. But I could hear every voice, every machine, every footstep in the hallway, every conversation people thought was private. I later learned I was in the intensive care unit at Sarasota Memorial Hospital. I only know that because one of the nurses mentioned it while changing an 4-bag. The first familiar voice I recognized belonged to my wife, Melissa. The second belonged to my doctor. Judging by the noise coming from the hallway, I guessed it was sometime during the morning of my 3rd day there. "Mr. Brooks is stable," the doctor said. "The swelling has gone down a little, and we're seeing encouraging brain activity. That's a positive sign." Melissa sounded hopeful. At least, she sounded that way. "So, what happens now?" "We wait," the doctor replied. "He could wake up tomorrow, or it might take another week. Brain injuries are unpredictable." A short silence followed. Then Ryan spoke. "If he doesn't wake up, what are our options?" The doctor answered calmly. "If his condition deteriorates, we'd have to discuss long-term care. If his heart were to stop, we'd also need to know whether the family wants full resuscitation efforts or a do not resuscitate order." Everything inside me froze. I wanted to scream. Instead, I listened. Melissa didn't hesitate. Daniel always said he would never want to stay alive because of machines. Her voice was unbelievably calm. "If it comes to that, I think signing a DNR would be the right thing." For a second, I wondered if I'd misunderstood her. Surely she couldn't mean me. Surely this was some horrible misunderstanding. Then Ryan spoke again. "Dad always hated the idea of becoming a burden." His words came out so naturally that they sounded rehearsed. "He told us plenty of times." "No, I never did. Not once. I'd spent my entire adult life fighting to take care of everyone else. Why would I suddenly say I wanted people to give up on me?" The doctor remained quiet for several seconds. "I understand," he finally said. "There's no immediate decision to make today, but if circumstances change, we'll discuss the paperwork." Melissa answered almost immediately. "I'd rather have everything prepared." Prepared. Like she was organizing taxes. Or renewing an insurance policy. Not discussing whether her husband should be allowed to die. Then came the sentence that has echoed inside my head every single day since. "He's 59. She sighed. "He's had a good life." A good life. That was it. 31 years of marriage reduced to 6 words. Not, "He's the love of my life." Not, "Please save him." Just, "He's had a good life." I wanted to move. I begged my body to move. Just one finger. One blink. Anything. Nothing happened. I remained trapped inside complete silence while someone else decided whether I deserved another chance. A few minutes later, I heard papers sliding across a table. A plastic pen clicked. The doctor quietly explained several forms. Melissa signed them. I couldn't see it. I didn't need to. I heard every stroke of that pen. That sound changed something inside me forever. They came back later that evening. This time all 4 of them. The hospital room became surprisingly noisy. Someone dragged a chair across the floor. Another person opened a can of soda. Ryan. It had to be Ryan. Nobody else in my family drank soda every waking hour. Chloe spoke first. He doesn't look any different. The doctors are optimistic, Melissa answered. They think maybe another week. Chloe let out an exaggerated sigh. Another week. She didn't sound heartbroken. She sounded annoyed. I've got work, friends, my own life. I can't keep driving here every other day. Nobody corrected her. Ryan shrugged. No one's forcing you. She laughed quietly. I'm just saying. Dad was never around whenever I needed him. That sentence hit harder than the accident. He missed every recital, every school event, every award ceremony. There was always another client, another meeting, another business trip. I couldn't argue. She wasn't completely wrong. I had worked too much, but I wasn't building yachts or buying sports cars. I was building security, college tuition, a paid-off home, savings, a future for them. Nathan finally joined the conversation. His voice was calm, professional, exactly the same tone he used during board meetings. Daniel always believed nobody should become a burden to the people they love. Again, another lie, delivered like established fact. Ryan chuckled. Besides. His voice dropped lower. Once everything gets settled. He paused. The trust starts paying. Nobody answered immediately. Then he continued. I found Dad's estate paperwork last year. I know roughly what everybody gets. Silence. Melissa finally interrupted him. Ryan. What? Not now. I'm only saying. I've been waiting long enough. Waiting. I was lying less than 10 feet away. Still breathing. Still alive. And my own son was already counting inheritance money. In that moment, I understood something that hurt more than every broken bone in my body. The accident hadn't destroyed my family. It had simply exposed who they had become. And over the next several days, things would get even worse. The next 4 days became the longest days of my life. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even open my eyes. All I could do was listen. And every hour, someone I loved gave me another reason not to trust them. The first conversation that truly shattered me happened the following afternoon. Ryan walked into my hospital room talking on his phone. Judging by the echo, he had stopped just inside the doorway. His voice was low, but not low enough. Yeah, he's still out. A pause. The doctors don't think he's waking up anytime soon. Another pause. Listen, can you check out a few waterfront homes in Venice? He laughed. I should have access to some serious cash pretty soon. Serious cash. That's what I had become. Not his father. Not the man who spent years teaching him how to drive. Not the guy who worked 70-hour weeks so he could attend a private college without student loans. Just future cash. I felt sick. Not because of my injuries. Because I finally realized I had raised a man who could talk about my death like he was discussing the stock market. The next visitor was Chloe. She arrived with Melissa. I've been thinking, Chloe said. Our house is way too big. Melissa asked quietly, what do you mean? I mean, assuming everything happens. Everything. Nobody could even say the word death. You shouldn't stay there by yourself. Melissa didn't answer. Chloe kept going. You could sell it. It's worth a fortune. Buy something smaller. Maybe a condo downtown. You'd have plenty left over. She was already spending money that didn't belong to her. Talking about selling the home where she'd grown up. The same house where we'd celebrated birthdays, Christmas mornings, graduations, and every Thanksgiving for more than 20 years. To her, it had already become real estate. Nathan came alone that evening. If anyone had asked me before the accident which member of my family I trusted most, I would have answered Nathan without hesitation. He walked over to my bed, pulled a chair closer, sat down. For almost a minute he didn't say anything. Then he finally spoke. "The sooner everything gets settled." His voice stayed calm. "The smoother the transition will be." Melissa answered quietly. "We shouldn't rush." "I'm not saying we should," Nathan replied almost immediately. "I'm just making sure the company doesn't fall apart. I know where everything is." Something about those words bothered me. At the time I couldn't explain why. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Too confident. Too prepared. Like someone who had already rehearsed taking over. "I know where everything is." The sentence stayed with me long after he left the room. Day 5. Another phone call. Another conversation Ryan thought nobody could hear. "I've already got a financial advisor lined up." A laugh. "No. Trust me. This changes everything." Another pause. "My inheritance alone should set me up." Inheritance. I was still breathing. Still hooked to machines. Still fighting. And my son was already redesigning his future around money he hadn't earned. Day 6. Melissa sat beside my bed by herself. For several minutes she didn't speak. Then, quietly, almost like she was talking to herself, "I don't know why things ended up like this." She sighed. "I really did love you." Past tense. Loved. Not love. Loved. Then she added something that made my stomach turn. "Maybe this is easier for everyone." Easier? For everyone. I wanted to reach out and grab her hand. Not because I loved her. Because I wanted her to explain what those words meant. Instead, I lay there like a statue, listening. Later that same evening I heard Nathan again. He thought nobody else was nearby. His voice was almost businesslike. "If Daniel doesn't recover soon, we should begin preparing ownership documents." Melissa sounded nervous. "Let's wait." "I'm waiting," Nathan answered. "I'm simply trying to make sure the company survives." Again. The company. Not me. Not the man who built it. The company. Then he quietly added something that sent a chill through my entire body. "I already know where every account is." Every account. Why would he need to know that? Why would he even be thinking about it? For the first time since the accident, a terrible thought entered my mind. What if this wasn't just greed? What if something had been happening long before that pickup truck hit me? On the morning of the 7th day, everything changed. I fought my way through the darkness. My eyelids suddenly felt unbelievably heavy. I forced them open. The room exploded with light. Everything looked blurry. A nurse turned toward me. For half a second she froze. Then she shouted, "Oh my God!" Within seconds the room filled with doctors. Machines started beeping louder. People asked me question after question. "Can you hear me? What year is it? Do you know your name? Can you squeeze my hand?" I answered every single one. Slowly, painfully, but clearly. The doctors looked relieved. One of them smiled. "Welcome back, Mr. Brooks." About 20 minutes later, Melissa walked into the room. The moment she saw my eyes open, something flashed across her face. First came surprise. Then relief. Then something else. It disappeared almost instantly. So quickly that if I hadn't been watching carefully, I would have convinced myself I'd imagined it. She rushed over and hugged me. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Oh, Daniel." I was so scared. I hugged her back. I even smiled. I'm lucky to have you. Every word that left my mouth was a lie. Because while my body had barely survived the crash, the man who loved his family unconditionally had died in that ICU room. I was discharged from the hospital the very next afternoon. The doctors wanted me to take it easy for at least a month. No stress. No work. Plenty of rest. I smiled and nodded through every instruction they gave me. Inside, though, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to spend the next month recovering. I was going to find out exactly who my family had become. Ryan helped me into the passenger seat. "Easy, Dad," he said with a grin. "Don't rush anything." I thanked him. Chloe brought flowers. Yellow lilies. She should have known I hated lilies. I'd complained about them for years because the smell gave me headaches. Apparently, she'd forgotten. Or maybe she'd stopped paying attention a long time ago. Nathan shook my hand. "It's good to have you back, Daniel," he said. "We've handled everything at the office. Don't even think about work." I smiled. "I appreciate it." The words tasted bitter. Walking into my own house felt strange. Everything looked familiar, yet nothing felt the same. Melissa fussed over me the entire afternoon. She fluffed pillows, adjusted blankets, asked every 10 minutes if I needed water. To anyone watching, she looked like the perfect wife. If I hadn't heard what happened inside that ICU room, I probably would have believed it too. That night, while everyone slept, I stared at the ceiling for hours. One thought kept repeating in my mind. If they'll lie about wanting me alive, what else have they lied about? The next morning, I announced that I was still too weak to return to the office. "I get dizzy just walking upstairs," I told everyone. Melissa immediately believed me. "You shouldn't even think about work yet." Ryan agreed. "Take all the time you need." Nathan nodded. "I've got the business under control." "Of course you do." That's exactly what worried me. For the next several weeks, I played the role perfectly. I moved slowly, pretended my memory wasn't quite right, occasionally stopped in the middle of a sentence as if I were trying to remember a word. The doctors had warned my family that mild cognitive problems were possible after the accident. I decided to use that warning to my advantage. The less dangerous they believed I was, the more careless they became. My first phone call wasn't to a friend. It wasn't to the office. It wasn't even to the police. It was to a lawyer. Not our longtime family attorney. I couldn't risk that. He'd handled our paperwork for nearly 2 decades, and for all I knew Melissa had already spoken to him. I needed someone who had absolutely no connection to my family. Through an old business contact, I was introduced to Michael Grant, a quiet attorney with a small office in Lakewood Ranch. He wasn't flashy. No marble floors. No expensive artwork. No receptionist offering bottled water. Just shelves full of legal books and a man whose eyes never seemed to miss anything. I sat across from him and got straight to the point. "I think my family has been stealing from me." He didn't look surprised. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and asked one simple question. "Do you want the truth, even if it's worse than you expect?" "I do." "Then let's start digging." That same afternoon, I hired a private investigator. His name was Jack Morrison. Former detective. 30 years of investigative work. Quiet. Patient. The kind of man who listened far more than he talked. I spent nearly 2 hours telling him everything. The accident. The conversations I'd overheard. The DNR papers. Ryan talking about inheritance. Nathan saying he already knew where everything was. Melissa telling the doctor I'd had a full life. Jack filled page after page in a notebook. When I finally stopped talking, he looked at me. "How long have you been married?" 31 years. He slowly nodded. I've learned something over the years. What? When money and death appear in the same sentence, people become strangers. For almost 3 weeks nothing happened. At least, nothing anyone else noticed. I kept acting like I was recovering. Melissa continued pretending to be the caring wife. Ryan kept disappearing during business hours. Nathan practically ran the company. Everything looked normal. Until one Thursday morning. Melissa had gone to the gym. About 20 minutes later my phone rang. It was Michael. I need you to come to my office. His voice sounded different. Serious. I found something. How bad? There was a long pause. Worse than you think. I drove myself for the first time since the crash. Every mile reminded me of the night my life had changed. When I reached Michael's office, he already had a thick folder sitting on the conference table. He waited until I sat down. Then he slid it toward me. Your vice president of operations. He paused. Has been stealing from your company. I frowned. Nathan. Michael nodded. For almost 3 years. My heart started pounding. How much? He looked me directly in the eyes. A little over $500,000. The room went completely silent. $500,000. Not taken all at once. Taken slowly. Carefully. Small amounts. Fake vendor invoices. Invented consulting expenses. Payments routed through a shell company registered under another state. Everything designed to avoid attracting attention. He planned this extremely well, Michael said quietly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Nathan. The little boy I'd raised. The young man I'd trusted more than anyone. The person I'd treated exactly like my own son. He had spent years robbing me, while sitting in the office next to mine every single day. And somehow, that wasn't even the worst part. Michael slowly turned another page. There are authorization signatures on these transactions. I looked down. My stomach dropped. Melissa's signature appeared again, and again, and again. 11 separate approvals. She hadn't just known about the theft. She had helped make it happen. I leaned back in my chair. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. It felt like something inside me quietly snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a door closing forever. Michael broke the silence. Daniel. I'm afraid there's still more. I stared at Melissa's signatures for what felt like forever. 11 approvals. 11 separate occasions where my own wife had authorized money to disappear from the company I had spent over 20 years building. I kept expecting Michael to tell me there had been some mistake. A misunderstanding. Maybe forged documents. Anything. Instead, he quietly pushed another stack of papers across the table. There isn't any doubt, he said. Our forensic accountant verified every transaction. I slowly flipped through the pages. Invoice after invoice. Transfer after transfer. Each one looked ordinary by itself. A few $1,000s here. 8,000 there. 12,000 somewhere else. Nothing that would immediately trigger alarms. But together, the total came to more than $500,000. Nathan hadn't robbed me in one night. He had done it patiently. Month after month. Year after year. He was careful, Michael continued. He created fake vendors, inflated service contracts, and moved the money through a logistics company registered under the name Carter Transport, LLC. Carter. Yes. Nathan's last name. Everything suddenly made sense. He hadn't been improvising. He'd built the entire system long before my accident. Then Michael opened another folder. I think you'll want to see this. Inside was a copy of a power of attorney. At first glance it looked legitimate. My name. Melissa's name. Both signatures. Then Michael pointed toward the bottom of the page. Our handwriting expert examined it. He looked directly at me. Your signature is fake. I felt my jaw tighten. What was it used for? Michael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slid over 2 property records. My house. Our main warehouse. Both documents listed another co-owner. Nathan Carter. For several seconds, I simply stared at the papers. What is this? According to county records, shortly after your accident, this forged power of attorney was used to add Nathan as a co-owner on both properties. They were preparing for your death. The words hit me harder than anything I'd heard in the hospital. Not because I didn't believe them. Because I finally did. They were waiting, I whispered. Michael nodded. The paperwork was ready before the accident. So they expected an opportunity. I leaned back in my chair. Every memory from the ICU suddenly came rushing back. I know where everything is. Now I understood exactly what Nathan had meant. He wasn't talking about files. He wasn't talking about office procedures. He already knew which assets he intended to take. Can we reverse this? I finally asked. Yes. Michael nodded confidently. The forged signature makes the transfer invalid. Our experts already confirmed it. We can freeze both properties immediately. And Nathan, he'll be notified the moment we file. I thought about that for several seconds. Then I slowly shook my head. Not yet. Michael looked surprised. You want to wait? Just a little longer. What are you planning? I smiled for the first time since entering his office. My wife reminded me yesterday that our anniversary party is next weekend. He understood immediately. You want everyone together. Exactly. If I file today, Nathan starts hiding. If I wait, they'll all walk into that party believing they've already won. Michael slowly smiled. I have to admit, I like your strategy. 2 days later my private investigator called. I was sitting alone on the back porch watching the canal behind our house. The afternoon was quiet. Too quiet. My phone buzzed. Jack. I have something. His voice sounded unusually serious. What did you find? It's about your wife. I closed my eyes. Somehow, I already knew. Go ahead. She's been having an affair. Even though I expected the words, they still knocked the air out of my lungs. How long? About 14 months. 14 months. Jack continued. The man's name is Ethan Cole. 35 years old. Personal trainer. They've been meeting regularly at a fitness club outside Sarasota. He paused. This isn't casual. It's a relationship. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind automatically began counting backward. 14 months earlier, Melissa and I had celebrated New Year's Eve together. She'd kissed me at midnight, wrapped her arms around my neck, smiled, and told me, this is going to be our best year yet. 2 weeks later, she met Ethan. While I was working 12-hour days trying to grow the company, she was building another life. Jack let me sit in silence. Finally he asked quietly, You okay? No. I answered honestly. But I will be. After we hung up, I remained on the porch for nearly an hour. I looked out over the water without really seeing it. 31 years. Not perfect years. We argued. We struggled. There were times business came before family more often than it should have. I know that. But I never cheated. I never stopped providing. I never stopped believing everything I did was for us. For a few minutes my hands shook so badly I had to grip the porch railing. I wanted to walk inside and confront her. Demand answers. throw every photograph in the house into the fireplace. Instead, I forced myself to stay exactly where I was. If I lost control now, everything I'd learned would be wasted. No. I needed patience. Because something told me the worst discovery still hadn't arrived. The last piece of the puzzle arrived 3 days later. It came from someone I never expected to hear from. His name was Brian Mitchell, and he'd worked in our accounting department for almost 7 years. Brian wasn't flashy. He wasn't political. He was simply one of those dependable employees every company hopes to find. The kind of man who noticed details everyone else ignored. Years earlier, Ryan had pushed him into a lower position after Brian questioned several expense reports. At the time, I believed Ryan's version of the story. I shouldn't have. Brian asked if we could meet at a small coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, he was already sitting there with a laptop and a flash drive on the table. He looked nervous. "I'm glad you're alive," he said. "Thank you." He took a deep breath. "I tried to warn people." "What do you mean?" "I noticed irregular payments almost a year ago." He slid the flash drive toward me. "I reported everything to Nathan." "What happened?" "He told me to stop asking questions." Brian looked down into his coffee. "A week later Ryan demoted me." I frowned. "You think they were working together?" "I know they were." He opened his laptop and showed me dozens of financial records. Every payment Nathan had hidden. Every approval Melissa had signed. Every fake vendor. Everything. Then he opened one final folder. My stomach tightened. There were monthly transfers leaving the shell company. The money wasn't staying with Nathan. It was being divided. Ryan had been receiving regular payments. Melissa had been receiving payments. Then I saw another name. Chloe Brooks Design Studio. I stared at the screen. "My daughter." Brian nodded slowly. "She found out about the fraud almost a year ago. And instead of telling you, she demanded a percentage." I couldn't speak. Brian continued quietly. "She called it keeping everyone happy." The room became completely silent. Every member of my family had been taking money from the business. Every one of them. While I believed I was building a future for the people I loved, they had been quietly dividing it behind my back. Over the next week, Michael and Brian reconstructed everything. Every transaction. Every forged document. Every approval. Every transfer. The evidence was overwhelming. By the time we finished, we had enough documentation to destroy every lie they'd built. Michael prepared lawsuits. Criminal complaints. Emergency motions freezing the properties. A brand new will. Everything waited inside one large folder. All I had to do was choose the day. Meanwhile, life inside my house continued as if nothing had happened. Melissa smiled over dinner. Ryan joked about golf. Chloe sent me cheerful text messages. Nathan kept assuring me that the company was running perfectly. I smiled back, thanked them, played my role. Inside, I was counting down the days. Our 31st wedding anniversary finally arrived. Melissa planned an elaborate party in our backyard. Neighbors, friends, business associates, even our pastor. About 20 people stood laughing beneath strings of lights while catered food filled long buffet tables. A huge banner stretched across the patio, celebrating 31 wonderful years. The irony almost made me laugh. Ryan showed up wearing an expensive blazer. Chloe handed Melissa flowers. Nathan walked in smiling confidently. He truly believed he already owned half my company. None of them had the slightest idea what was coming. Outside the front gate, Michael waited inside his car with every legal document ready. A short distance away, 2 sheriff's deputies waited for my signal. Everything was in place. Exactly the way I wanted it. Around 8 o'clock I picked up my glass. Tapped it gently with a fork. The conversations stopped. Everyone looked toward me. I'd like to say a few words. People smiled. Melissa walked over beside me and slipped her arm through mine. The perfect wife. The perfect family. The perfect lie. I've spent the last 31 years believing that family is built on love. I began. But nearly dying taught me something very different. The smiles started fading. When I was unconscious. I wasn't asleep. I heard everything. Silence. Complete silence. Melissa slowly removed her hand from my arm. Ryan looked confused. Nathan's expression hardened. Chloe stopped smiling altogether. I picked up 4 envelopes from the table. Each had a name written across the front. One by one, I handed them out. Ryan opened his first. Inside was the transcript of every word he'd spoken in my ICU room. The inheritance. The liquidity. The waterfront homes. Attached behind it. His termination letter. Effective immediately. His company credit cards cancelled. His vehicle allowance revoked. And one final page. My revised will. His inheritance. Exactly $1,000. I figured that should provide all the liquidity you were talking about. His face turned white. Chloe opened hers next. Hospital transcripts. Financial records. Copies of the payments she'd accepted to stay quiet. A letter removing my guarantee from her apartment lease. And another copy of the new will. $1,000. No more. She burst into tears. I didn't. Melissa's envelope contained photographs, hotel records, private investigator reports, bank documents, her affair, the forged signatures, the stolen money, the divorce papers already filed. She looked at me as though she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. Daniel. I can explain. I calmly shook my head. You already did. In the ICU. Finally. I looked at Nathan. I don't have an envelope for you. He swallowed. You raised me. I know. You loved me. I did. And you stole over $500,000 from me. His shoulders dropped. Michael stepped through the gate carrying the legal file. Behind him came the sheriff's deputies. One of them walked directly toward Nathan. Mr. Carter? We have a warrant for your arrest. The backyard went completely silent. Someone dropped a wine glass. Nobody moved. Nathan looked at me one last time. I never thought you'd wake up. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I know. Those were the last words I ever said to him. The deputies led him away in handcuffs while every neighbor watched. I looked around at everyone still standing there. I appreciate all of you coming tonight. The food is excellent. Please enjoy it. Then I picked up my car keys, walked through the front door, and left that house forever. As I drove away, my phone started ringing. Melissa. Again. And again. And again.